Hello, I'm Susan King. I'm the Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at UNC Chapel Hill with one of the great graduates of UNC, Helen Murray, of course, of the Wall Street Journal. We can't claim you as our own graduate, but 77, Moorhead Scholar, that's pretty good.
I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
Always like to come back to Carolina, particularly in the spring.
And we've got it all blooming for you. And I want to talk, I think when people think of you in your career, they think of you as a newspaper man, Wall Street Journal, but of course you did a stint at CNBC, so you've done the television business. And I kind of want to get your view right now. You're at the Wall Street Journal, but it's not just the newspaper business, is it?
No, in fact, my responsibilities are sort of everything but the newspaper. I am responsible for our digital properties, WSJ.com, MarketWatch, SmartMoney.com. I'm responsible for our growing video operation, which we now have 12, 13 million streams a month of video on multiple platforms, and our live events, our conferences, which is also a growing business. So I do everything but the newspaper at this point.
So what is that relationship then? What should journalism students think about as this is a new business?
Well, I think, as you point out, I did my 3 years in television. I think it's all conflating. I think it's all becoming the same thing. And I think what journalism students need to realize is that in the future, you're not going to be just a writer or just an on-camera talent or just a videographer. That journalists are going to be called on to do it all. You're going to be called on to be able to write good stories, to present good stories to the camera, to be able to shoot videos, shoot photographs, have some understanding of how you can mine data on the internet and perhaps present it in a compelling way. Understand, and this may be the toughest part for journalists, understand marketing. We don't call it marketing, but social networks is really, using social networks smartly is really a form of marketing, building a more intimate relationship with your viewers, readers. I think you have to do it all. It's a lot to ask, but I think that's both the fun and the challenge of journalism going forward. It's people who know how to use as many of those tools as they possibly can to tell a compelling story.
So two things come from that, and I agree with you on that front. But first, there's sort of a core thing to be a journalist. So I kind of want you to explore that with me because, what is it? Every graduate of the school should be a journalist. But the second part is, you can't be good at all those things.
No, and you don't have to be good at all of them. But let's start with the first one.
Okay.
I don't think the core will change. I think the core is being able to report thoroughly and tell a good story, first and foremost in writing. Look, writing is the greatest invention, the most efficient way of consuming information. It's not going to change. And so being able to report a story, comprehend a story, analyze a story, and tell it in the written word in a compelling way is always going to be the core of what we do, and that is not going to change. And it's probably too much to ask people to be great at all those other skills, but I would urge students to try and get good at as many of them as possible. And by the way, there's one I didn't mention, and that is really understanding the digital world. Maybe take a few computer courses in there. We have journalists now who write code. It doesn't mean every journalist is going to need to write code, but boy, in this world, at the rate it's changing and at the rate the kinds of applications that deliver news are changing, having some understanding of what you can do and not being totally at the mercy of the technologists is really important.
So you got to be in your...
I, by the way, am totally at the mercy of the technologists, and it's not a good thing.
And you don't write code.
I do not write code, but I've thought of, boy, I wish I could take like 6 months off and go somewhere and do, at least learn the basics of HTML.
And you have to understand the concepts you got people thinking about, right?
You have to understand it. You have to be able to push back sometimes because you can hire technologists who can do amazing things with code, but at the end of the day, it's the instincts of the journalist, how you tell a story, how you present information, how people want to consume information. It's those instincts that have to prevail. And so you can't be at the mercy of your technologists for designing your applications.
So the newspaper business is really a multifaceted business.
It is. I said this to a group of students earlier today. I have been in this business since I was 9 years old. I literally started a neighborhood newspaper and walked up and down the street and took notes and had one of those jelly sheet mimeograph machines, and I'd run off 20 copies and sell them for a nickel a piece. So I've been in the news business for, I guess that means I've been in the news business for 48 years. I've seen a lot. I've never had more fun than I'm having right now because it's so exciting, because it's so multidimensional, and because we're really reinventing the news business.
And I guess, so flexibility, I mean, and understanding the culture is also really one of the skills that you want to see our graduates have when you're hiring, right?
Absolutely. In those 48 years that I've been in the business, there has never been a time when the premium on youth has been as high as it is right now because of flexibility. You know, if you take somebody who was a cable news executive producer, it's very hard to move them in our environment and say, hey, yeah, you're going to do that, but you're also going to write copy, and you're going to shoot, you're going to work a camera, and you're going to do all these other things. I mean, and so young people who are coming out, first of all, they have an intuitive understanding of some of the new media, like social media. But second, they have the flexibility to adopt workflows that are completely different than the ones you and I or people 30 years younger than us learned. It's changing so rapidly.
And that is the fun. But tell me a little bit about the television business of the Wall Street Journal, because you are able to monetize what you and your staff are now doing.
Oh, it's fabulous. And in some ways, it's the most fun part of what I do, because after 30 years of being disrupted by Google and Yahoo and AOL and all these new technologies, we now find ourselves on the disrupting side of the equation. I mean, the Wall Street Journal is a 110-year-old publication that until 10 years ago didn't even have photographs in it to speak of.
That's right.
And now we're doing 5 hours of live video a day. We have close to 15 million streams a month of video, some of which appears on our website embedded in stories. But then we have a separate iPad app that's strictly video, and we're offering a service we call WSJ Live to Apple TV, Roku, Xbox. We're going to be on the Xbox. All these services, we're really at the moment of great conflation for the television business, because you can now get to the big screen not just through the cable box, but through the internet connection. And that's creating an opportunity for all sorts of new content opportunities. So we have, 1 million people, 1 million streams a month on Apple TV.
Wow.
People watching on the big screen. So it's really a big change for us. And what we're trying to do is leverage the 2,000 journalists who we already have. So we're training those journalists to use their iPhones, which has a very good video camera in it, to shoot video. They will, we have a guy named Charles Farrell who was covering the European economic crisis, was in Greece when the riots broke out, and had a collapsible tripod, set up his iPhone, Skyped into New York, and had a live conversation with us on one of our live web shows with the riots going on in the background. So, that's the kind of stuff, as you well know, that 10 years ago you would have had to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get a satellite truck into position. And I don't know if in Greece you could have found a satellite truck to get into position. And now you do it with an iPhone and a collapsible tripod and a Skype connection.
So Alan Murray, Wall Street Journal reporter, now producer of television.
Oh, I mean, we have a pretty big operation. Now, obviously, it's not the same. It doesn't have the same production values and production quality that a television station. But it's news and
immediate.
Well, immediate is exactly the point. What we found is no one writes us and says, when Charles Farrell was coming from the streets of Greece, that Skype connection looked a little grainy, and I couldn't see the mole on Charles's left cheek. And the feedback we do get suggests that people actually like it because it feels real, because it is real. There's a verisimilitude to it. And that's why I say, so I don't think in the future, 20 years ago, as you well know, that was presenting on camera was a skill. Yeah. It was a profession. I mean, that's what you did. And the logistics of it were complicated enough that you probably didn't have time to do a whole lot of reporting, because you had to get the, satellite truck in place, you had to get the camera in place,
I
you
was
had to set up
different.
the shot. I'm sure you were
I did
different.
some reporting.
But you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. Feed them into your...
And now it's, it's 15 or 20 minutes. You're working on a story. You take, another example, one of our best reporters in China, Jeremy Page, fabulous reporter, a hardworking reporter. When Kim Jong-il died in North Korea, he got himself very quickly to the remote region of China that was on the border of North Korea, to do some reporting on, he was curious about what was happening, any military movement. He would see any military movements, would see any commerce going back and forth across the border. And while he was there, he took out his iPhone, shot the border scene, put his iPhone on a collapsible tripod, did a stand-up, and sent it back over an internet connection. We had it, 15 minutes later, and put it up on the website. So it's a new world.
Really new world. Let me just go. Last night you gave a lecture to the
Yes.
Kenan-Flagler School of Business. I'm going to summarize the lecture, which was terrific.
Thank you.
Was one of the things you worry about right now in terms of our economy is really, the gridlock in Washington and worried about how to get out. And you said this is a moment, which I'd love you to share with our students, a moment where we'll be tested right now. Is this the collapse of the United States as a global power, all of Greece and Rome and all those things we've already heard about? Is that the moment in history? Or is it American exceptionalism going to be the story about the United States?
Yeah.
Give them an idea.
Yeah, I believe that very strongly. I mean, I spent most of my career working in Washington. You spent much of your career working in Washington, and I felt like the time I was there was a pretty much of a downhill slide in the ability to get well-meaning people on both sides of the aisle to come together and figure out hard solutions that are in the public interest. It's just gotten more partisan and more difficult to make those things happen. And I do believe we've reached a moment in time. The world, since the collapse of Lehman in 2008, the world has changed pretty dramatically. The United States economy is no longer setting the tune for the rest of the globe. The dynamism is in China and India and Brazil and other countries that are coming on strong. And that's great. But to take advantage of that, we have to retool ourselves, and we have to be able to sell into those markets. And we have the comparative advantage of innovation. I mean, you think of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Sergey Brin or Larry Page. Those people are uniquely American. So we have the kind of industry and the kind of culture that will give us the opportunity to recreate ourselves for this new world. The challenge is Washington. The challenge is doing the policy pieces of it, dealing with the deficit, dealing with education, dealing with immigration, where we're the best and the brightest in the world want to come to the United States, and we're telling them no. You can't. Well, that doesn't make any sense in the kind of economic competition we're dealing with now. So I do think it's a moment where we will either fall prey to kind of the rise and fall of great nations that we've seen throughout history, or we will prove once again that as a country we do have an ability that's almost unique in history to be flexible and reinvent ourselves.
And I agree with you. I hope that's the one that wins, because
we're cheering for the second one.
And because we're continuing to produce more head scholars like you and students from this school at School of Journalism that are creative and smart, determined, and have something. They want to change the world.
And we certainly have the best universities in the world. That's why people from all over the world want to come to our universities, and we should make the most of that.
Thanks very much, Alan Murray.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Good to be here.